Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me is my co-host,
Anthony. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everybody. And so here we are, PRT. Everybody calls it PRT. You know why? Because that's a pretty righteous time.
Always.
Everybody has a good time. But not everybody. Some people just have a sort of righteous time. So and so for them, it's SRT, sort of righteous.
And then the nobodies have a not righteous time.
They have a not righteous time.
Yeah.
They're the 2% that not like.
Yeah.
But 98% do like. So here we are on another episode. So before we go any further, I have a guest, a really awesome guest. I had the pleasure of having him at my second conference. I got to know him. He's a really nice guy. I consider him a friend, and I think he's done a lot of great work in this field. A lot of people describe him as one of the OGs.
Definitely.
Definitely. In this
OG triple.
Yeah, for sure. He's been around, and he's done some serious work. Remember, folks, if you want to help support the show, the Patreon is the best way to do it. We have a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier, but you can do as much as you want. The $10 tier, all the way up to the $50, gets you different levels of swag bag. And if you don't know what those are, go check out the YouTube Live. If you haven't checked out the YouTube Live, you don't know what you're missing, because we do 2 to 3 hour episodes at least 3 times a week. Right now we're doing Wednesday, a retelling of stories. Friday we have a guest, and then sometimes we'll have people can jump on open lines. We have a Patreon episode that we do every other Monday, and then we have, which is coming up, it'll be next Monday. And then we have the Sunday show, which has kind of become our flagship show, where we get several hundred people in the chat talking and saying and doing, and we retell encounters, and we have worked really hard to get to where we're at, and I'm happy to say that we are, as of right now, this recording, we're almost at 40,000 on YouTube.
Oh yeah, by the time this comes out, we'll probably be at 40,000.
Yeah, it'll be already past 40,000. So there's that. So let me get to my guest. This guy, I'm telling you. So my guest is Ron Morehead. Now, if you don't know who he is, he's been known for decades worldwide. He's a researcher to the Bigfoot, Sasquatch phenomena. He's an author, researcher, lecturer, experiencer, producer. He's renowned for the Sierra Sounds. If you don't know what that is, just stick around and you'll find out. He comes closer than any other researcher to having a complete body of evidence. Now, that's something in this field that's really hard to come by, is evidence. Everybody's always talking about data, but they don't really have it. And to date, what do we have? We have the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is still hotly debated whether it's even a legit thing. But the Sierra Sounds are the only Bigfoot recordings. They've been scientifically studied, time-tested, and accredited as genuine. And Ron has documented his own personal interactions with these beings, produced a story on CD, and also he's produced a book, Voices in the Wilderness. In order to try and understand the enigmas associated with these giants, he began to delve into quantum physics. Now, a lot of people have said, well, how do you quantum this and quantum that? And they've said all kinds of whatever crazy things. I think it's just like anything else. You just do it.
Yeah.
So,
like on Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Well, you better try.
Exactly. So he delved into quantum physics to find the scientific answers that he was hunting for. For the answers of what his friends had experienced, what he had experienced, and as a result, he wrote another book. And it is a thought-provoking book called The Quantum Bigfoot. Ron still resolved to dig deeper for answers. He produced another book called Bigfoot Unveiled. And now he resides with his partner, Carrie, in North Carolina. But he's traveled from Alaska to Patagonia and North America to Siberia in search of the truth of how these beings are able to stay so hidden from classical scientific radar. Besides being the keynote speaker at many conventions, including mine, he has also been featured on countless radio programs, TV documentaries, Learning Channel, Travel Channel, you name it. He's been everywhere. He's like Nick Redfern and Gerhard. Like every time I turn the TV on, they're on.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
I try to avoid that, though. I try to avoid having the television on, but if it's on in my house, it's something cryptid or paranormal based. And it's not me, folks. It's not even me, because I don't have time to watch a lot of that stuff. I have to read a lot. But Nellie, or you, Anthony, or Tony, or somebody's doing research in the house, because we are a team, and every TV in the house has got something to that effect going on almost always, unless there's like an agreement, hey, we're going to watch a movie or something together, which happens very seldom. It just seems like it's always on. And so Ron has been on television. He's done a whole lot of stuff. So without further ado, Ron Morehead. Ron, you want to say hi to the audience?
Hi, audience. Hi, Josh. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure.
Fun.
Sorry it took so long to get this done. We've just been so slammed. We have so much going on. So a lot has probably transpired in your life since the second PRT conference, which is the last time that I saw you in person. So anything of note that that update or before we get started and going back in time?
Oh, gosh. I've got a good memory, Josh. It's not as long as it used to be. I think I left there and went to Land Between the Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
That little place out there where they see the dog man a lot, supposedly. And anyway, I spent a couple of days there. I think I'm going to go back there here not too long. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. And I've been to a conference or two since then. Forgot when that was. It's been a year and a half or a year. How long has it been?
It was Labor Day weekend 2023, right?
Really?
Oh. Yeah, it's been that long. And so now, because we didn't do a conference last year, we had too many things going on, too many issues. And so we have kind of put the conferences on hold until, we can figure it out. But we have had some issues, and you and I have discussed this. I mean, when you have a certain belief, there's going to be people who don't like it. And I know that you and I have a very similar take on a lot of this and this subject. And one of the things I've said, and I want to throw this out there right here, right now, people will start off with these things are a flesh and blood type being. And then at some point, they'll flip over to, okay, maybe this isn't a totally flesh and blood thing. It's something sort of metaphysical or something we can't comprehend. But it never seems to be the opposite. You don't have people from it could be a metaphysical camp going, oh, no, you know what? I'm absolutely convinced now that they're flesh and blood. I've never seen that. And I'm not joking, folks. I've never seen that. I started out believing this, just like the dog man, what I saw when I was 15, that it was like a flesh and blood thing. But now I really don't believe that. I'm not buying into that because there's just way too much going on. And I'm starting to see a movement now taking place, which had to take place, because there's a lot of people who are coming into the Bigfoot field just as newer people. And they are taking a look at this, what evidence we're afforded. And they're like, this is not what we thought it was. This is not some giant ape running around out in the woods. I just have a hard time with that because that's not what people are saying. That's not what we're coming up with. And I think your evidence up to this point has been some of the most compelling. It's absolutely astonishing, actually. So where do you want to start, Ron? Like when you were young, did you have any experiences as a child that may have,
not at all.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. No, I had, I think they said they spotted a wild man run out in the woods. And that's when the Patterson film was coming out or something. But anyway, I started off like most researchers do. I just had an experience, but that's most researchers. A lot of people don't have experiences, and that's what puts them in the paradigm they're in, thinking they're just a big ape running around the woods, because that's all we thought it was. I mean, when we first encountered them. However, there was some really unique things went on with us up there at that Sierra camp, and we really were puzzled with how they did what they did a lot and how things happened. But Al Berry, the investigative reporter we took in 1972, this all started with me in 1971 when I went into camp with these guys who said they'd experienced this, and I wanted to go in. One of the guys wouldn't go back. He said, I'll go back if you go with me. So that's how I got involved, really. And that's when I seen my first big track and heard the sounds that they had recorded. And anyway, I got to ride out with one of my friends. They're all my friends, but I wasn't a hunter at the time. But I became a hunter after that because I wanted to be involved in the group. But anyway, we're all thinking flesh and blood ape out there in the woods messing around with us, family of them. How'd they get up here? There's not supposed to be any apes up here. Because we're 8 miles in the wilderness, number one. Not that that's unusual, but it is for a camp like we had. And about 8,000 feet in elevation. So it was quite a trip to get in there. Very imposing area, but very beautiful area once you get there. And so I got involved with it and started researching it because it was all pretty religious people. We were going to church, and I was actually a board member. Me and Bill McDowell were board members, founding members of a mega church in Merced, California. And we wondered how this happened. And giants aren't supposed to be around nowadays. So my first challenge in the winter of '71, after I had a few encounters with these things, I had to go back and find out where giants came from, what's going on here, because the Nephilim and all this stuff that the Bible talks about. Well, this didn't seem to fit all that, but yet it did because they were huge. And so you have to wonder. But they didn't harm us. They didn't eat us. They didn't carry us away in their sleeping bag or nothing like that. So whatever they were doing, they stayed out of our visual perception for the most part. But we was able to record them. And but in 1971, 72, that winter, Warren Johnson, the leader of our group, he sent a 23-page letter to Ivan Sanderson, who was a cryptozoologist. And he thought it was probably somebody pulling his leg because nobody has encounters like this, repeated encounters. It wasn't just once, it was several times. We started to go back with our tape recorders. And he sent it off to Peter Byrne, who had a research center in Oregon. Peter thinking the same thing. I didn't know all this until later when I read the correspondence between them all. He sent it down to Alan Berry, which is at Redding, California. Alan came down and interviewed us just thinking, well, somebody's pulling his leg too, but I'd like to go up there and see what the guys are talking about. Because once he heard the sounds we recorded and the story, he knew we weren't just jerks. We're business guys. We're serious. So we took him up in '72. He started experiencing the same thing. And he started recording them, but at the same time looking for how anybody could pull this off way back there in the woods. So anyway, he spent several years after, about 1974, 76, somewhere right in there, he started trying to find an academia that would kick these things and test them because he had a master's in science himself, and it has to be a classical answer to this riddle that's going on here. Sometimes you hear your stover, you're being tore apart where you have all your food and everything. You think the cans are going down the hill and everything else, and you step out of the shelter that we had up there, a little makeshift shelter, and nothing's changed. And that's just one thing. There's a bunch of things happened up there that I write about in my book, Our Voices in the Wilderness. And it's just uncanny. So anyway, he said, stay with science, don't talk about this stuff. So, well, we didn't. We kept it close to our chest, and just the only family members. So that's how it got started for me, and I just been on it ever since because there's an answer to everything. I think, Josh, you just there's a problem, there's an answer to it, and I always look for that answer. So I had to find the answer to how these things happened up there. You think you're 8 miles in the wilderness and no roads, no trails, you just got to make your trail, and all of a sudden you hear a car door slam right outside the shelter. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And in daytime, we'd hear a big whooping sound up above us, above our heads, like a big tuning fork up above us. And you look around trying to find the source of it, and you never do. You just don't see anything. But then when you get into quantum science, you figure out a lot of this stuff can make sense if you open your mind up. But we're all trained in Newtonian physics from 1687. What goes up comes down. You can measure it every step of the way. It's got to be physical, material, predictable. Well, all that's true in our third dimensional density, but you get out of that, and there's more densities in that. There's more dimensions, I guess you want to call it. And you start getting into quantum science, which is accepted science worldwide, and it says there's 10, maybe 11 dimensions, and we only see 3. But yet these other things exist, and that's where the ethereal part comes in. Our soul, our spirit, is in that can go into that density. When you die, according to quantum physics, energy can't die, and we all are energy, frequency, and vibration. We're energy that vibrates out of frequency. and that was established by antimatter, which Dr. Paul Dirac in 1933. He got a Nobel Prize for that, and it showed where a particle going through the Hadron Collider in Switzerland collided, and it became energy. So he established that antimatter, matter, and energy are interchangeable. Wow, well, that's kind of a revolution. Well, that was established by CERN in 2012 when that happened, and then it's been also there's so much into this. I just encourage anybody to get into quantum science. Like Edgar Mitchell said, it takes classical and quantum sciences together to have clear perception. But so many people, especially when they're raised with their paradigm, this thing sitting on our shoulders here, to believe certain things and don't believe certain things. And I was raised religiously, so I had a hard time, not a hard time, but it's opening my mind time. It was a fun time, really. It still is fun. Like a parachute, if it don't open, it ain't going to work, and you got to open your mind up. But there's a whole lot more going on than what we can see with our eyes. Our eyes only see within light's frequency. Light's frequency is 430 to 770 terahertz, and that's the frequency of light. And if there ain't no light, you're not going to see unless you have a little extra on your prisms or something. But as animals, some animals can see different perspectives. We only see within that, though. We only hear within certain. We don't hear infrasound or ultrasound. We don't smell or don't have the olfactory sense of a bear. A bear has 20 more times olfactory sense than we do. And people can realize how limited we have been as humans, and that's all because of something happened eons and eons ago when we were created. Which it's hard to talk to religious people about this because they don't do their homework and they're stuck in their paradigm and taught that this is right and that's wrong. And if you get on the wrong side, they're going to put you off in the funny farm with the dung field or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just I get into that with my quantum theory, so that's kind of might be getting ahead of you. So if I ever just slow me down and pull me back,
No, not at all.
I get rattled away with this stuff because it's so interesting to me. But I delved into religions and a lot because that's how I was raised, and I realized that King James version, and it really started back before that, way into Constantine, 326, I think it was, when he formed the Nicene Creed and Nicaea, where he had these scribes come together. There were so many factions going around. He had to get one religion so he could control people, and that was the four Gospels. Four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were canonized then, and that's what you had to go with. And the other ones were canonized until later on when the Romans got really a hold of it and started doing more with it. But just about all our stuff comes from a cuneiform text, which is ancient clay tablets that have been found in Mesopotamia, and they have been decoded, deciphered, and read. And there's thousands of them, not just hundreds of thousands. It's really the history of what went on back there, and how it parallels with our Bible is unique, I think. And I didn't find too many things other than the time element. What the Bible covers in 3 or 4 verses or 3 or 4 chapters in Genesis. Well, it took thousands and hundreds of thousands of years to happen. And I think if people just want to get their head out of the box and start studying this stuff, they'll realize what went on and how it happened. And I think it's just fun. It's interesting to know this stuff because it makes sense to me. And how they call them the giants, the powerful ones that came down from the sky and started manipulating the human genome, or the creation of the troglodytes, probably is what I'm thinking. But it's interesting to see how that falls with the Bible, where it says the watchers came down and some of them fell from grace and went into the third dimensional density and started raining on Earth, and they messed up people. I say messed them up. They gave us our start and showed us a lot of stuff, but they fell away from what God's I want to say Star Trek like thing. You're not supposed to interfere with us. We have our own karma, our own destiny to fill. We're not supposed to have our ways told to us. We're supposed to react to experiences. That's what we're all about, experiences. If you don't act with experiences and don't answer experiences with love and compassion, you're going to be in trouble. Your own personal vibration, which we are, will not raise. And it's got to raise out of this third density environment to get into where it's supposed to go, where it's designed to be. And I don't know how far you want to get into this stuff, but it's I get so excited about it. I just love to talk about it. Anyway, it all really boils back to the Sierra Sounds, which I produced, and I thought the world should hear these, and I'm glad I did now. At first I was warned not to. Too many people could laugh at you, and I had a pretty good standing in the business community and towns and all that, but I don't care. I mean, the truth's the truth. This is where I'm going at. And I'm now in my 80s. I've been doing this for over 50 years, and believe me, people need to know about this. And I think it's the time the world is changing, and we need to know what's coming and what aliens are all about, what UFOs are all about. And I know people to this day, right, this area where I'm at, that can accept UFOs because I haven't seen one. Well, you'll never see quantum science until it changes and drops down into our third density environment. After it gets out of that, it turns into energy and swoops away, and you don't even see it anymore. So these people that claim they saw one disappear and say, "Oh, that's woo, that's pseudoscience, all that stuff." Well, no. You get into Dr. Paul Dirac's equation, which shows, and Einstein said, if you find the frequency of anything, you can change its matter. Wow, that's a big one. So you get into that and you realize that how do trackways disappear? How do they say disappear? I've interviewed too many people over the years that said they saw one disappear and all of a sudden just disappeared. Well, how's that happen? It happens because their density changes. They go out of our third dimensional environment, third density. Now here, I'm going to put this one little phase in here. They are not all the same. A lot of these things from eons ago have crossbred with indigenous people, and they have lost some of their attributes because their telomeres, like ours, have been trimmed. We can only live 120 years now, 100 years. So well, most people put themselves in that bubble, but you get into the King's List, which I think you know about, in the cuneiform texts, and they lived thousands of years. These ones that fell from grace, called the Watchers in the Bible, but really they're just aliens that went against the rules of the universe, which is don't interfere. Nothing's supposed to interfere with us.
So when we talk, and now a lot of people have asked the question, I mean, about, the Bible. I mean, we have a lot of, and you and I have talked about this, and we've talked quite a bit, actually. We've said some things, but everybody, it's the Abrahamic faith. And you just hit the nail on the head when you said Mesopotamia and the Sumerian tablets. The Sumerian tablets, because Sumer was in Mesopotamia, and actually people don't realize this, but Israel was a part of it. And there are people that will argue that, but that's the truth. And the city that Abraham came from is actually called Ur, and it's a Chaldean city, but it was part of the Mesopotamian region. That Mesopotamia is a region, but it's Sumerian, and it, like when you get down to the particulars of it, and then later it was Babylonian. And these are the cities. Now, these cities, would be like it'd be just north of Israel. And so he wasn't from the land of what is now known as Israel. Even if it was back then, it really wouldn't have been. And now eventually the Israelites, they usurped all of that area and they took over Jericho, and Jericho became like the largest, I believe, at one time. And those cities, that's where a lot of this stuff is centered around. That's where it comes from. All of these tablets you're talking about that talk about the Anunnaki. Now, you said something like about the Anunnaki being the Watchers. Yeah, that's very possible, maybe even probable that that's what that is. And not only that, but people don't understand. Like Abraham's father, he actually came from another city called Haran. And that is actually even further deeper in Mesopotamia, further away from Israel. So there is this faction of people who want to believe that he was born in Israel and he was the first Israelite. That's not true. It wasn't until his son Isaac had another son named Jacob, and then he became Israel. He himself was Israel. And they took the name and they turned it into the name of a country. And I think things kind of got off the rails, with the translations, because it was translated and retranslated. And I believe Abraham's dad, I'm saying this from memory, but his dad's name was Tehran or something like that. And Tehran is actually a region that lied adjacent to the Persians, and they were constantly at war. So I don't know if his name was Tehran, was named after the region he came from. But if you looked at a map of the Levant, now it overlaps. Mesopotamia isn't all of Levant, but that is where you get these tablets. And I'm going to say this, and I've said this before, Tiamat, there was a war between her and Marduk. And Tiamat is the one who takes credit. She was the queen, right? She takes credit. She takes credit for creating the hairy man. She also took credit for the Minotaur and the Centaur. Now, they were called other things back then. A scorpion man, and then there was a few other things that she created that were these hybrid beings that I believe were imbued with a mixture of human and alien, which could be called, genetic tampering with angels.
Yeah.
Because that's what they were. And so we don't know. We know that the hairy man, i.e. Bigfoot, is spread out throughout the entire world. And it makes me laugh when somebody says, well, we don't have Bigfoot in our country. Yeah, you do. I guarantee you they're around you.
They haven't seen one, so it must not be there.
Exactly.
Bigfoot respects the imaginary line of your country.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I can't go to Uzbekistan. We are not allowed there.
Yeah, he doesn't agree with illegally immigrating to your country.
Yeah, he's not down with that. He don't want to get chased by ICE.
Yeah.
So he's not going to go. He's not going to go over there because there's trouble. No, Bigfoot is pretty much universal. And I believe this. I said this on the show. I think that the Minotaurs were extremely, extremely aggressive beings. And I think they were used as a weapon in that war, in that ancient war. And I think most of them were killed off. Now, there is a very compelling photo that's gone around, and nobody's really debunked it yet, but it's of a Minotaur sitting below the Vatican. Now, what's interesting about it is it looks like a bachelor bull buffalo, like a Cape buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know anything about animals, that is reputed to be one of the meanest animals on Earth. When you go to Africa, that's one of the first things they'll tell you: the hyena, the hippo, and the buffalo, Cape buffalo. They don't even mention the lion as one of the meanest. It's not.
No.
They mention those three in particular. They don't even tell you crocodile. They said the hippo, and then the hyena. It was really, really aggressive and just an obnoxious animal. And then, of course, the Cape buffalo. I mean, there's a story there was a guy that wrote a book called Death in the Long Grass, and I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. But there was a story that I remember. I was reading that book, and then it led me to another story that I just read in some, like hunting magazine. I don't even really read hunting magazines, but like I have hunted hogs extensively. And so this particular hunter had shot one of these Cape buffalo, and 2 days later it came out of the brush dying and managed to unalive him. And it only went after him, and then it took off and died. But it was pretty crazy to read that story. And I'm sure if you guys do some research, you can look it up and find it. I don't have time to get into it, but I believe that these things were the product of some sort of genetic manipulation and tampering. I'm not talking about now. I think it's happening now too. I do. I really believe that shadow governments are doing things with these beings. But this happened thousands of years ago, and it's hard for people to fathom how old the Earth is and how many times maybe we may have been visited by ultra-terrestrials, interdimensionals, extraterrestrial, whatever, you name it. They've come here, and there is an entire world below our feet, which people just do not want to accept that. And they stay stuck in a biblical narrative. Like you said earlier, Ron, it was given to them in 325 AD by the Council of Nicaea, where they came together and just said, we're going to use these books here. And it was really about control. And now everybody's basing their entire lives. They're living and dying based upon what some men came up with to control us back in the 300s. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Everybody has a choice. And that's one thing we're given freedom of is choose. Everybody on this planet can choose. They don't think they can, but they can't, but they can. And that's what we have is the freedom to choose. So some people aren't going to believe any of this, and some people are just going to stay with what they've been taught. But it's all depending on how much research and how open-minded you want to be and how much you want to just look for the truth. Look for the truth in anything. What you're saying, Josh, is really right on a lot of it, and it's just mind-boggling why people don't want to delve into it. You know, I don't usually tell people about this unless they ask me the question. If they ask a question, they're usually hungry for the answer. So I try to give them my answer anyway. And if they want to believe it, fine. If they don't, well, they got their choice. But if you want to raise your personal vibration, you have to get into this stuff like we have. And I really appreciate some doing your homework like you have, Josh. And it just, if you don't do your homework, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
But you have to have the incentive to do that, I guess. And what gave me the incentive was the anomalies associated with Bigfoot. But I say Bigfoot, it was the people that were, I say people, it was the beings that we were dealing with up there. But what Dr. Curlin, who did the original study on the tapes that we recorded up there, he said part of it that represents an animal over 8 foot tall. And as you know, Scott Nelson, the cryptolinguist who got a hold of him by accident in 2008, said it represented a language by the human definition of language. Now, Scott Nelson, I was just on a program with him last night. He's a 2-time graduate of the Foreign Language Institute of Technology in California. And I had him vetted because I've had a lot of people tell me they thought they knew what these things were saying or if the tapes were real. But he was vetted, and the guy wrote a letter back and said, he's more than qualified to transcribe these sounds. And he says they're outside the human range and there's no manipulation in them. He was trained by the military, made a career in the military, just listening to things he didn't, codes that were coming through, languages that were coming through to see if it was a language or a code, if there's any maliciousness in it and all that stuff. And he listened to our sounds and gave them to me. He came all the way up in Missouri where he was teaching and interviewed me and Albert both and got copies of the original tapes to take back and study. And he said, these things have a language. That means a lot. I didn't realize at the time we were recording their sounds, but to have a language, according to Dr. Lieberman at Brown University, only humans have the ability for language. Wow. That really opens you up. You got Dr. Curlin, professor of electrical engineering, said no manipulation in the sounds whatsoever. Totally pure. And there's no manipulation. Representing an animal over 8 foot tall. Then you got Scott Nelson saying, well, there's a language in these sounds. And he presents that in conferences with me sometimes. And then you got Dr. Liebman. He's a cognitive researcher. He passed away a couple of years ago at Brown University. He says, he studies cognites in chimpanzees and gorillas, every animal, to see if there's any. But he says only humans have the vocal mechanism for sapient language like we're talking now. Now, these things have that. So he's wrong on one count. Al Berry tried to approach him one time and said that, I got some sound I wish you could listen to, knowing he was a cognitive researcher. And he wouldn't even listen to him. He said, no, he says, he thought Al was a former student trying to debunk him or something. But he finally got a hold of Dr. Curlin, who unbiasedly, I just want to know if these are real or if there's any maliciousness in them at all. That's when Dr. Curlin gave his report. He presented that report to the Anthropology of the Unknown Symposium in British Columbia in 1978. And it's written in a book too, Man Like Monsters on Trial. His whole paper's there. And he shows in a graph how the sound deficits that he was looking at was inside, outside, above, and below the average human range. So they can speak. They have the vocal mechanism to speak like we do. I've heard report after report over the years that these things were calling my dog's name out. My dog wasn't around when they were out in the woods somewhere, or they were talking over there, but you never could see them. And that's always been a mystery. How people hear, they say, "Well, I heard the samurai chatter. I heard these things talking, but there's nobody out there." Well, there's a reason for that. They toy with people, I believe. A lot of them do. And I got to back up just a little bit and say they are not all the same. I said that before, but it's very important people understand that. A lot of them are crossbred with indigenous people and have degraded because of us. Yes, I think that's what the Patterson film was. That was a hybrid for sure. Of course, we're all hybrids. You and I are hybrids. Everything's a hybrid. It's about the hybridization program going on this planet now, and it has been for eons of time. But they messed with the troglodytes, the Anunnaki did years ago, and created what they call they're called powerful ones from the sky, and they can manipulate things. And it tells how many different types of aliens have been on this planet over the eons of time. I think they just love it. Why wouldn't they? This is a beautiful planet. I mean, we're the best planet in the galaxy here, and everybody wants to be here. I think they're concerned now. The reason they're showing up so much, not Bigfoot so much, well, yeah, they are too, but I mean UFOs, because we're warring. We're a warring species, and that's because of the way we were created, and that's too bad. But we got to stop that stuff. We got to stop hurting other people and learn what love and compassion is, and start going that route, because that's the only thing that's going to help us. And we need a lot of help. I tell you, we're in trouble if some of these wars don't stop and some of these people stop cutting other people's heads off. It's just a thing that's coming about, and you're going to see a lot more. And I think there's going to be a UFO alien. They're going to expose themselves before they let another atomic bomb go off.
I think that it's going to happen quicker. It's going to be sooner than later that we're going to get more and more, because we here, just doing what we do, the floodgates have really opened since we've started talking about vampires. And I know it just sounds absolutely silly. And if you'd have told me this, and I've said this before, I was doing the math and I was like, if you'd have told me this maybe between the first and second conference, I would have been like, I don't know. Because we had a few reports, but we weren't really classifying them as what they are. And now, knowing what I know and what's been dropped on us, I believe that it's real, but I believe that it's a type of parasitism that happens, and that's what creates this. And now you're starting to see this black goo that's showing up during Bigfoot reports, and now it's everywhere. Everybody's talking about it, but we were right there at the beginning of all that when it was really starting to. The first report I think we got was in Washington, wasn't it, Anthony?
Yeah, it was.
It was, and it was like this ectoplasmic or whatever, and then we started getting these reports of this black goo. Somebody in North Carolina, I think they saw like a black panther that was coughing some up. And then there was another one that said that it was a Bigfoot that was all entangled in it. And then there was a dog man, and a few different reports of each one. But these are just singular examples of these cryptid type creatures appearing covered in this black substance. And they're not anywhere near an oil field.
No.
And then there was a woman recently who gave us, there was a murder of crows, and they were just covered in this sticky tar. And she said that she watched them dissolve. That was in Illinois. And so I was just sitting there going like, what in the heck is going on?
And the guy who claimed to see this hog-like creature shapeshift into a fully clothed man, the intermediate form it took as it was shifting was like covered in this black
goo,
like glossy goo.
He was a hunter from like Florida, wasn't he? He came on the show and told us this.
Oh yeah,
I mean, this guy came on and told us. A lot of people are kind of apprehensive. Like we have one lady who gave us a story recently where, and this happened right. It's a very large corporation, a large computer company, and she says, I heard. Well, her daughter did. She says, my daughter told me that you guys were talking about seeing these beings, not us, but people seeing these beings around these computer companies and their campuses. She's like, I got to tell you something. She's like, I saw one of these. She thought it was a Bigfoot, but it had a snout. Now, it did have it didn't have the backward bent legs of the telltale sign of the dog man, but it had sort of a snout. So I'm thinking the term that everybody uses is gugway, which is actually a northern native indigenous term, but that is what we've been taken to calling it. And this thing, it looks like a Bigfoot with like a snout, but she said that it was like leaned over and it was like hacking up this black substance. And I was like, I thought, man, I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what kind of, but I believe it has something to do with either ultra-terrestrial, extraterrestrial interference. And I'm telling you, it's been going on for a long, long time. And I think that Bigfoot, like you said, it's interesting what you said too about the hybrids, because they don't all look the same. And there's different ones, like these ones out here at Apache Pass. We've been going out there, and when the weather warms up, and there's rattlesnakes everywhere out here, so I got to wear some big old boots. But when the weather warms up, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to do a lot more videoing because my wife snapped a photo off of a bridge, and you could see this head of something in the tree. And we didn't even know it was there. It was on Thanksgiving Day, and I had a horrible kidney stone, and I was trying to bear through it, But those Bigfoot out there, they're not as tall, but they're very broad-shouldered. They're very up-top heavy looking. They're very big, massive shoulders, and they have this weird elongated snout, but it's not a dogman. I mean, it doesn't look wolf-like at all. And they have this ashen gray on them. Recently, and until recently, and I'm talking like this just happened in January, a farmer out there got in touch with this guy's name's Clayton, and he told us that he witnessed them, one of them, rolling around in soot. And it wasn't a fire that he made. He doesn't know where this fire came from, but there was ashes. And so we kept wondering why they were this ashen color. So that would speak to a level of intelligence that they have to possibly make fire. And they use that ash maybe to keep mosquitoes off of them or something. But he witnessed one of these back in the summer. He told me about it in January, but it happened like in July. And he witnessed it doing that. So this was one of the first sightings we had gotten since 2019, I think, out there.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there going like, what is that? So that speaks to another level of intelligence with these creatures. And those particular creatures don't look the same as the ones you hear about in Louisiana or Mississippi or the ones up in the Northwest that look like giants. They top out at about 7 feet probably from what we've been gathering. And they can run fast, like crazy fast. They don't walk real. And when people get footprints of them, they're not those flat-footed prints. They look like they kind of walk on their haunches. And so it's really weird the way that they walk on the front of their feet. So it's really weird how they walk. And it looks like they have only 4 toes too. It's really bizarre. And so this is some sort of subset species, but they've been there for a long time because I remember my family talking about it going way back. And when you first encountered the beings that you encountered, you were in the Sierra Nevadas, right, Ron? Is that correct? Okay, so those beings that you saw them being like gigantic, right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
I saw one.
Yeah. Well, that's all it takes. You don't need to see 100 of them to know. I saw one dog man, and I'm good. But I can tell you that there's a lot more with a lot different stuff going on, man. You hear all kinds of different stuff that I'm actually, sometimes I will literally thank God that I didn't see what some of these people have seen because I don't want to see it. I've already seen what I saw. Now, I've never really fully seen a Bigfoot. My wife has twice. Once up in the Mojave Desert, and then when she was a child, and then she saw one when we were working at a site called Roe Lane. Now, I will say this. I saw the back of this thing, and I had this conversation with Lyle Blackburn, and we were talking about this, and he saw one in Fouke, near Fouke, when he was researching, reddish brown color. The one I saw was a chocolate brown color, but neither one of us count it like as a sighting because neither one of us saw the head of this thing. So we don't really know what it looked like. I don't know what it could have been for him, but for me, my wife saw it from the side profile, and she said it had a very flat face, looking very much ape-like, but also human. And it was dark, but it was bright enough you could see because when I turned my truck around, the headlights hit it. And so I looked, and she's screaming and yelling and going, "Look, look." And so all I saw was this thing moving from the side. The interesting thing, it went behind a tree that should not have been able to conceal it completely, but it did. And so that's why I think that these things have, like you said, there's a quantum, component to it,
Yeah, I got a call on the carpet the other day not the other day, but one of these podcasts, somebody called in and said, well, I was on Sierra Sound's side until Ron Morehead said he thinks they might go into trees. Well, I had a lot of people say they actually saw them. Well, credible people. I thought they were credible. They said they saw it go into trees. Well, if they could change their matter through frequency, and that's how they would do it.
Absolutely.
They would turn into energy only, and they have to get energy from somewhere. That's why you find a lot of reports around power lines and power transformers and things like that.
Power plants.
They need energy. That's why our batteries go dead sometimes, I think, now, looking back on it. But I think they need energy, and they can actually get the energy out of a tree.
That's true.
That sounds pretty ridiculous, though, when people just hear me say it. All of a sudden, they put me in the funny farm, But if they would just do their homework and see what's possible out there that they can't see, feel, or touch, or measure, or predict, outside of the Newtonian physics they were raised with from the 5th grade on, realize there's so much more going on, and there's got to be an answer to it. And my answer was density. They change their matter into energy only, and then go out of our perception anyway.
Well, lightning strikes trees. I mean, to go to ground, it does.
Somebody asked me, how come? Something about dead trees. I said, well, maybe it wasn't any good for it anymore. Once lightning hits it, it kills it. There's no energy in it anymore. Or maybe they wait till the lightning does hit. I don't know.
What about this? Because, the ghost, this is one of the reasons why at the second conference, and I've talked to you about this before, Ron, when you were coming on to be a guest, and we had talked about it. I wanted my goal, before I got attacked viciously for the last year and a half, for basically, believing the way I do. This is what I wanted, was to bring the ghost, the UFO, and the Bigfoot communities together. The cryptid community needed to have this. We need to marry those groups. Not everybody has to have the same views, and everybody has to get along, but at least be open-minded, because I tell people when I'm talking to ghost investigators, and I was talking to a lady the other day, and bless her heart, she's a nice woman. She gave me a bunch of ghost stories. It was pretty incredible. And I told her, I said, yeah, I've done a lot of Bigfoot and Dogman researching, and she kind of laughed. And I said, what are you laughing? She goes, she's from England. She's like, it's just hard to believe, just a big hairy thing out there, just going around, And I said, well, you've seen a woman from the 1600s without a head walking around your house. And she's like, well, yeah, but I saw it. I said, you saw it? Yeah, well, I saw a dog man, and I told her, I didn't say it like that, but I told her, I said, I saw a dog man. So, and she's cool. We laughed about it. And I just said, look, I said, think of it like this. I was like, when you're around these cryptids, your watch battery, I always wear a watch. I've been doing it since I was young. It's just, I love watches, but my watches go dead. I've lost batteries on so many watches. And I've told her, I said, when I've worked at sites that are haunted, same thing happens. I work these security sites. I have a security business, and I'll be like, the watch goes dead. The phone dies really quickly. We've been on posts, Anthony, you too, where your phone just goes dead really quickly.
Yep. Just suck up energy.
They suck up energy. And when people have claimed to be out in the field hunting, they run into this rake-like creature, this dogman creature, or a Bigfoot, doesn't matter, flying humanoid, their phone is dying. It's going dead. It's like it happens every time. These creatures need energy. Now, why are they seen around power plants? The power plant out in Rockdale and in LaGrange. There's a plethora of stuff out there, the creatures that people have run into out there on their way to work or whatever. And when you start interviewing some of these guys that were working out there in Alcoa, a lot of them had seen things out there. And they're around those power plants because that's where the electricity is at. Mm-hmm. And people don't want to accept that. They don't want to believe that, but that is the truth, absolute truth. And somebody even took it a step further. They were like, well, they're often seen around water because they need to drink it. And I said, yeah, and water is also a very good conductor too.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. I mean, so being that the quantum thing, okay, so that's going like they can make themselves smaller, right?
They can change forms.
Change form.
If you get into quantum physics,
mm-hmm.
Even Einstein said, energy, which we're made of, everything's made of energy, will never die. It just changes forms. So religious people are going to say, yeah, I'm going to go to heaven one of these days. You just watch and see. Well, if you're a physicist, you're just going to change forms because everything has to change forms sooner or later. This biological body is going to die. No way out of that. However, the ethereal body, which is inside of us, that's our consciousness, our spirit, if you want to call it that, that's what's connected to the universe. That's what we need to connect with within ourselves. Then you can learn things from the universe because your pineal gland, which is inside your head, will pick up the signals. It will transfer that thought pattern into your heart. Your heart has a brain. Most people don't realize that, but your heart has a brain. It has to get in coherence with the one sitting on your shoulders, the brain up there, the biological brain. It takes care of the body. The heart takes care of everything. I mean, if you learn how to get coherent with the pineal gland into your heart, and your heart learns how to get in rhythm. That's what chakras are all about, balancing your chakras. Get it in rhythm with your brain up there, then all of a sudden it'll tell you what to do. It's called a gut feeling. But some people will use their analytical mind, which has been trained and been brainwashed with things, will tell you to go over that way when your heart tells you to go over that way, the other way. Well, you got to learn. I think we all need to learn to listen to our heart, our gut feeling. That's what's going to be right. And I really emphasize that. But I want to touch on something else you mentioned a while ago. How many people go out in the woods with fear? They got their guns, they got their, well, you know who some of the people I'm talking about probably. They want to kill something.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, if you don't learn to control your fear out there, you're going to be, well, they feed on fear. Let's put it that way, simple. The dog man, I think, would, and I think Bigfoot does, but we didn't have fear. I mean, after we realized they weren't going to eat us up the zero camp, they weren't going to carry us away in the sleeping bag, they weren't going to do anything. They weren't going to bust in that little shelter we had and take us. We had guns, though, but I don't think they were afraid of our guns. We realized they really aren't there to hurt us. And what are they doing? Why are they there? Why is this happening? I think they just want to find out. I don't know what they were asking me, but if you listen to my second CD, which I produced, it's got me yelling back at one of them. And that's where the samurai cry came in. That's the night I saw one, and it was crying. It was saying that it was a little adolescent and a female down by the creek, and I saw this thing shoot through the trees. It was just wasn't totally dark, but it wasn't totally light either. One of those times of days when just after dusk there. I can't tell you what it looked like, but I will say it was a sighting because I heard what it was doing when it was doing it. We had three of them at the camp, we think. I recorded the little voice. It was, we think, a young one who had his mother down by the creek. And it sounded like the mother was coming down on it, like it was really trying to discipline the kid. Like, I think when they have their children, and they do have children, by the way, they have their kids in this environment, this third density, they have to train them how to get along with everything around them, especially humans. So humans, they don't try to influence humans. Can they brain speak? Can they talk like that? I think if you get in the right frequency in your mind, they will do that, and they can do that because they can change their frequency, and that's something we need to learn to do: change our frequency.
Oh yeah,
everything's frequency, energy, vibration.
Yep. You sound like my wife. Everything. She's always like frequency, vibration, vibration. She says.
Oh yeah, I mean it is. That reminds me, actually, and I kind of wanted to bring this up during the episode. In the book of Joshua, whenever it details the fall of the walls of Jericho, that's a very interesting story to me, and I think that's very much related to frequency, because if I remember correctly, there was a specific ritual that had to be done for the walls of Jericho to fall, and that was for 7 days. 7 priests would have to walk the perimeter of the walls of Jericho 7 times a day, and on the 7th day, when they completed the 7th walk around the perimeter, the 7 priests would take their 7 horns and blow them all at the same time, and that would make the walls of Jericho fall. Now that sounds like some sort of frequency technology to me. It's just a fascinating thing how sound can be such a powerful thing that we really don't understand.
The monks over in Tibet, which is in the Himalayas, but they can move things like the boulders that I've seen in South America and all over the world. Really, these enigmatic structures that are too big. They can actually levitate with boulders with sound frequency. They blow these horns. They got them, and that was supposedly filmed, but it's been confiscated away now. But sound is a lot. There's a lot to sound. I mean, a lot of interesting things about sound. In fact, you get anything on its 49th octave, and it'll change into light. Any sound will. You get on the 49th octave. That's interesting, because I've had some people say they saw a Bigfoot turn into a light and just shoot away. Well, once you get into that, then you're getting into energy only. That's how I think where we're going to travel through space. That's what's going to be, because no thing can travel faster than light, but energy can. Like our thoughts can go from one to another instantly. And as it gets into physics too, which get into the positron, the proton, and how they communicate over long distances. Well, that's interesting stuff. I would just encourage anybody listening to this to get a quantum physics 101 and start learning things, because it's the one who, the Bible says, my people die for lack of knowledge. Well, come on, let's not die. I mean, everything's going to die, but your etherical body doesn't die, so that's where it's going to go on and change into something better. Or not. You have to come back and experience it again. And I wasn't raised with multiple embodiments. I wasn't raised with reincarnation, but I totally believe that now, because I think if you haven't learned it in this lifetime, if you've been attacking people or hurting people in any way, you got to pay for it. You got to answer to it. And you're going to have another life where the karma is going to give you those challenges. And you have to live up to, learn how to react to them, not as a victim ever, but as with love and compassion. When you do that, you're going to be much further ahead. Everything's going to go better for you. You're going to be healthier. Everything's going to work better. That's just the truth. So there.
It's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Nobody's cut me off yet.
No. I wanted to say something about the difference between when people talk about heaven and earth, and there is something. There was when Jesus he chastises. I usually just say it and I let people look it up themselves, but this is Matthew 22:28. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there, but it's one of the passages where Jesus chastises the disciples for they're questioning him about marriage and about how it exists after the resurrection. In other words, like after you are resurrected, you go to heaven. What happens to your wife? And he's very specific about that. He's like, he tells them, he says there will be no marriage in heaven. He said, at the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage, And he says that we will be like the angels. I mean, it's very specific. There's different translations that depending on which Bible you use, but I know that one because I've talked about it to my wife. I'm like, look, when we pass on and we go on, whatever, we're not married anymore. So don't come at me like you know me. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. I'm joking. She's over there going like, what? No, but it's true though. Jesus says that, and it's very to me it speaks to what you had said. Like when you pass away. And you're addressing really just, let's just be honest, but biblical zealots, because that's what a lot of these people are. But when you pass away, I've tried to explain this to people and it makes them so angry. And I said, look, matter is changed, is not destroyed, but you will be transformed into something else. And I had L.A. Marzulli on the show, and we actually, he talked to that. We've talked on and off the, camera about it. And, that we're going to be transformed. We're going to be changed. We're going to be like angels. You're not going to have a wife. You're not going to have any of this. You won't recognize each other in the same way. You will just be. And you're actually going back to the absolute or the creator, the source, And people have argued with me and they've attacked me vehemently for this because I said that we may have been seated here, may have been put here by the Anunnaki. And I said, look, I don't necessarily believe this 100% because I don't know. And we won't know until the end. But I think that it doesn't really matter whether they created us or not because everything goes back to the source because the source created them. So it doesn't really matter. There's all this argument really about the minutia. And when in the Old Testament in Genesis, when it says let's create man in our image. It's very specific. It doesn't say my image. It does say our image. which is, it speaks to him as God, talking to what, the angels, or who is he talking to? And then when people, they want to use the argument, they always go back to the Old Testament, and you can use the Old Testament as an argument for slavery, for genocide, for having multiple spouses, for everything you could possibly imagine, because what these, and I'm not saying this is God, I'm saying that these scribes wrote of as God, they wrote the book to where it would suit their needs. So God becomes whatever they want him to be. So you're following this strict biblical, these strict biblical accords that don't necessarily, they don't jibe. It doesn't make sense. And then there's all this confusion. There's all this like, what is the word I'm looking for? Like it's a conflict. It doesn't match up. Contradictions. And so I think how this pertains to what we're talking about is that this is what's happening here. You have these two camps. One of them is ultra super, I would say, like left-brained, very analytical. There has to be this science, robotic, and the science isn't really fitting. Well, we have to look a certain way to the outside community, and that's how we're going to get people to follow us and believe in this stuff. I don't agree with that. They already think we're lunatics, and I don't care. I really don't care what those left-brained people think. And then you have this other camp that is this religious zealot camp, which is like, this has to be a Nephilim. It has to be from the Bible. And if it ain't in the Bible, then it ain't real. And they get real upset and real angry. And I'm like, I'm sitting here going like, first of all, I'm not a preacher. And I had somebody send me a scathing email. Well, there's been, Anta's looking at me like, there's been several.
Yeah, which one?
Which one? But this guy, he says, I liked you when you were preaching the word, and now you're just going off the rails with this weird Anunnaki stuff. And I messaged the guy back, and I said, sir, with all due respect, this is a person that's almost 70 years old. So I was very respectful, and I said, look, you're an elder to me, okay? I said, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm not a preacher. Okay, I'm not up here preaching the word. I'm talking about cryptids, alien abduction, ghosts, alternate realities, and everything in between. But if the word comes out, I'm going to tell it the way I know it. Now, there are other people who probably know it a lot better than I do. And there is no way that anybody is without sin. I have committed sin, and I've laid my sins bare for everybody to see. They're not going to dig something up on me and go, oh, we got you now. I've already admitted to everything I've done. There's no secrets. Nothing been hidden. So whatever these people think that they can come up with, they're going to have to make stuff up. Now, once you get to that point where religious zealotry becomes just making stuff up about somebody, are you truly a person of God anymore? Or are you just wanting to be right and you're hating someone who has a different view? And that's kind of where we're at in this community. And that's a problem, because if we could have conversations with people who don't necessarily agree with us, and you can stop and go, oh, I see what you're saying there, instead of these people becoming angry with you because they're not getting their word out, because it's more about what they want to believe rather than what really is.
Yeah, everyone's got a piece of the puzzle, and I think that there needs to be a synthesis between the religious viewpoint and the scientific viewpoint.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between those two lies the truth.
Like Edward Mitchell said, he said that it takes quantum and classical sciences together to have clear perception. So I think these people that are interested in quantum or the classical science only are doing themselves a disservice because they don't look outside their box. I know academia, I know a lot of them, scientists are good guys, but they've been trained within certain parameters, and they can't get out of that. They'll stay with that till they die, probably. I mean, I hate to say that, but my whole objective for a lot of this is to try to bring those two worlds together. They don't have to be separated. They don't have to be. You can all be decent and talk to each other right, and don't. If they got their choices, they can either believe you or don't. But like I say, if people don't ask me a question, I don't give them what I think is the answer. If they ask me a question, I'll give them what I think is the answer. If they don't want to believe it, that's their choice. We all have choices, and that's what our karma is made of. That's why we all have these lives, is to experience things that we're supposed to learn how to respond to. It's not the experience as much as it is the response.